Good evening. I'm Jane Miscavige, President of Fairfax County Council PTA. With me this evening are Kara Jenkins, our Vice President of Outreach, and Larry Mills, President of Union Mill PTA, and our special guest, Dr. Scott Brabrand, Superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools.
Fairfax County Council PTA supports 170 local PTAs, and we're happy to welcome their presidents here tonight. PTA presidents have submitted more than 200 questions from their members. To try to fit these into our time tonight, we have consolidated these questions into broad categories. To get the most time for Dr. Brabrand's responses, this will be held as a listen-only session. If you do have further follow-up questions, please type them in the chat box so that we can help you find answers after the session.
We did receive some questions about special education, and we're referring those questions to Michelle Cades, who is president of the Special Education PTA, or SEPTA. SEPTA will hold a Q&A just like this with Dr. Brabrand next Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. And how to register for that, those details are forthcoming. We're pleased but not surprised that Dr. Brabrand made the time to speak with us tonight. Last year, Virginia PTA named Dr. Brabrand Superintendent of the Year for his long-time commitment to family engagement. As FCPS stabilizes and improves distance learning, we look forward to providing a constructive parent voice at the table. We hope this conversation tonight will begin to restore some trust and goodwill. Dr. Brabrand, thank you and welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jane, Kara. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this evening. Do you want me to begin, or do you want to start right with the questions? I can certainly tell you just up front, I'm glad to be here tonight. I really appreciate everything that the PTA has always stood for. As you know, and many of your presidents may know, my own father was an elementary PTA president and a middle school PTA president. So I grew up in a PTA family. And I believe in PTA as a voice for parents and a voice to stand up for what's right for children. And I know right now with COVID-19 in the last few weeks in Fairfax County Public Schools, there's been a lot of frustration that we didn't stand up distance learning as fully as we would have liked. I can tell you tonight that our face-to-face live instruction, which is that critical piece that people have so much wanted, we've had a successful day today. We had successful days late last week. And we're back on the right track, and we are hopeful, very hopeful that will continue the rest of this week and next week and for the rest of the school year. It's also important to know that the very first day that we shared that we would have learning back up, we did have it back up, what we call asynchronous learning, lessons and pre-recorded videos and reach out to emails from teachers to students. We've had that going from the very first day of April 14th. We know there was frustration about the live face-to-face, but it's working, it's back up, and we hope for continued success moving forward.
Thank you. You know, just to give some context, because our PTA presidents, like so many other people, you, your leadership team, the school board members, PTA presidents have been getting lots of questions. So I just want to give some context for anyone who might be viewing this video after the fact. School has been closed for 6 weeks. And some families have more questions than answers at this late date. FCPS's attempt to pivot to distance learning has faced an array of problems, making education feel like a tortured game of whack-a-mole. Parents and caregivers are trapped in an impossible situation. How to support the education and social emotional needs of their children while at the same time needing to be at work, either out of the house or in the house, working from home, and balancing the bandwidth demands of their students. Every single person connected to Fairfax County Public Schools has struggled to adapt. And for some people, it's been traumatic. Our hearts go out to our teachers who, despite their own family situations, have gone above and beyond to reconnect with their students. Operations staff have delivered more than 500,000 meals to hungry children, and FCPS leadership has been working around the clock in isolation to pivot our massive system to meet the needs of our students. Some parents have adjusted and are satisfied with the connections the teachers have been able to maintain with their students. And we have received specific requests to tell you that tonight. But that said, a concerning number of parents have expressed hopelessness and feelings of being shut out from FCPS's decision-making process. We need school to support our children and families and to not add further trauma. Dr. Brabrand, we know you agree. Tonight, we'll cover 3 broad areas of questions. The first, we'll spend a few minutes just reviewing how did we get here. Then we're going to pivot and move forward to talk about what our expectations as parents and caregivers should be. And lastly, we'll focus on how FCPS will improve consistency and communication. So for our first segment, if we could spend about 10 minutes, Dr. Brabrand, talking about how did we get here? Why did FCPS implement distance learning the way that it did?
Sure. So as you may recall, we got here where we closed school on Friday back in March. I think it was the 13th. And on that day, later in the afternoon, the governor did close school for the next 2 weeks. We didn't know that the governor was going to make an announcement. We were trying to scramble to decide what to do. We had real concerns, of course, about the spread of COVID-19 in our community. And so we planned really then in the middle of that Friday how to stand up distance learning with what we knew at that moment. So we began to look at a plan that would have us after spring break, as several other school divisions that we got on a call that very Friday were saying, Arlington, Falls Church, Alexandria, that we needed time to process this dramatic change happening around us, to get our teachers ready, to have an opportunity to do training for thousands of teachers. And so late in the day when the governor did close for 2 weeks, we saw that as a closed school situation for all of our teachers and staff. We then decided that a week of training to get our teachers ready was necessary. And we made a decision early on, really even on that Friday, that we did not want to change the school calendar, that we were going to keep spring break the way it is. I would be honest and say none of us knew how serious COVID-19 was on that Friday as we know now. We knew it was a serious issue, but we could not have envisioned that it's become what it has for us. So it was our best plans to try to give people some semblance of how things would unfold over the next 4 weeks. And that's how we got to that date. We knew already, I think the day after spring break was a teacher learning day. And so we just shared on that very Friday, hey, we'll start school back up in some shape or form that Tuesday. Of course, after the governor closed for 2 weeks, almost a week later, the governor announced school was going to be closed for the rest of the year. We had no idea that that was going to be the decision, and we had no idea that was going to be the decision when we closed school originally on that Friday. So a lot of changing variables were going on, and I acknowledge what you just shared earlier. It has been a frustrating time for many of our families and parents, and our teachers have been superheroes. Our teachers and principals are SBITs to do everything they've been asked to do these last few weeks. They are truly superheroes, first responders for our children. And we've learned a lot. We've made some mistakes, but we're moving on, and we're going to continue to build the distance learning platform we have, because frankly, as we look around us today, this situation that we're dealing with right now is going to be more than a fourth quarter issue. It really may inform what school looks like in the fall and beyond. So we really are taking a deeper dive now with the lessons learned so that we move forward stronger than ever.
So thank you for that. And as PTA volunteers, we understand that there's always more to the story with school. Everything is more complicated than it seems at first. But how can we answer the question that we keep hearing about, well, why did it take a month? Why did we keep spring break? Why did it take a month to get ready to launch the synchronous or face-to-face learning?
So there were a lot of things. We had to create training for our teachers. We took the governor's first 2 weeks on that Friday, again, that very first day we closed, hey, school's closed 2 weeks. We knew we had more than 15 snow days. We said, okay, a 2-week closure, we'll be back. And we knew we would need to do planning for our teachers no matter what. We needed central office people to do those plans for teachers, to come up with the training sessions. And we were going to spend the week before spring break getting our teachers trained so they would be ready to hopefully really, have distance learning the way we wanted it. We did the training. We spent the week. I think there were 250 sessions that we had. So when we're training teachers, it's not one meeting like this and we train you and you're done. There were 250 sessions like this over a week's time. And I think that's one of the challenges where it's not so simple. Fairfax's scale does make it sometimes more challenging. Things that can happen quicker in a smaller division or smaller divisions, and even the divisions around us that are larger are still half to 2/3 smaller than Fairfax. We're 190,000 kids. No one is, the next largest division is still half the size that we are. So it was a lot about preparing the lessons, the materials. We were doing the learning packets that we were mailing out for kindergarten through 8th grade. So we had to get all that done, all of that policy work redone about how we do the training. We could have honestly maybe decided to change the calendar for spring break. There was some discussion about that, I'll be honest, among leadership team. I had one parent, and again, there's so many parents with different perspectives, and one parent said, so much has been taken from me. I'm a medical professional. I'd planned spring break to be with my family. Don't take that away. Don't change it up. And we wanted that to be a chance to rest and recharge. But we acknowledge that for other parents, it was those 3 weeks of getting ready and spring break, those 4 weeks was 4 weeks too long. And it's fair feedback. Fair feedback.
Okay, thank you. And just what's the upshot for why it took 2 weeks to get us to a point where most of our kids now can enjoy face-to-face learning?
So
for people who haven't tuned into that.
Yeah. The simplest way I can explain face-to-face learning and why it took longer than expected, we went with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra with guest links that we had used since 2012. We had used it for online campus and we had no issues. But the reality is the very first day of using it, we had security issues, violations where kids came in and did and said, and others that were not students, inappropriate things. Because of that, we worked with our vendor who directed us off that platform to the Blackboard 24/7 Learn platform. That's where we've traditionally housed lesson plans for years for our teachers, and we knew teachers were familiar with it. They said that platform would be far more secure. The problem is when we made that pivot to that platform, there were issues around volume. It simply couldn't handle the load. That Blackboard 24/7 platform, as much as we tried, it couldn't handle the load. So we've gone back now, as you know, to Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and we've allowed teachers, many who are already using Google Classroom, to use Google Meets. The load is holding, and what we did this time that we did not do the first time is we instructed the teachers to do the links securely. We gave teachers the wrong information when we did links the first time, and that's the truth. The vendor then, when we did the links again, like we had done them for almost 8 years with no issues, we had only done it with a small group of kids, not a whole 190,000 kids. We had those security issues. We should have seen those security issues, and there's no excuses for it. But the vendor moved us to another platform. It hadn't been tested for load, and try as we may, load wasn't going to work on that platform. So we pivoted away from it. We've gone back to have teachers put the links in the right way, which is what we should have done the first time, secure links through Blackboard Collaborate Ultra or working now through Google Meets. And that's how we've gotten things back up and running. But it was 2 weeks of delay, and we recognize that, and I've taken full accountability for it. Now we need to get our kids caught up as much as we can in this fourth quarter and begin preparing and looking forward to how we're going to do school in the summer. And we are going to look at opportunities and programs for the summer, even if it's not face-to-face. And then how we're really going to do school in the fall, how every American school district is going to do it this fall. And frankly, it's a worldwide issue right now, and everybody is taking different approaches. We need to come up with the best approach for Fairfax County schools.
Okay. You mentioned in your message last week in regard to the face-to-face learning that had seen so many hiccups. You mentioned that you have hired a law firm to investigate what happened. And that caught a lot of parents off guard. They thought, well, that's awfully quick. And so we've been seeing a question a lot. Why spend taxpayer money on a law firm review of what happened?
Well, the school board and I want accountability and transparency. That's important in Fairfax County Public Schools. Why did something go wrong? Fairfax is not a district where things go wrong. And this is an opportunity to make sure we have lessons learned. And in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to get what those lessons are. I think I've shared with you, honestly, just 5 minutes ago, what the lesson will be. But I want the school board wants an outside independent review to make sure those weren't the only lessons that needed to be learned. We should have done the links right the first time. When we had issues with security, we moved to a different platform that we hadn't thoroughly tested for load, even though the vendor said it would work. And then we had to come back to square one and just do the links the right way. And it was a zigzag that gave our teachers frustration and certainly our families and parents. If there's other things that come out, I want to hear them, and I'll take full accountability for what they are. And I think it's important that we have the transparency and accountability that Fairfax County Public School parents and community members deserve. And that was the intent of it. It can also make sure that they reviewed everything that we did in terms of working with our vendor to try to have the right solution as we did distance learning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And just one last question, just for context, because on social media especially, parents keep seeing posts about, well, my school district across the country is doing this really well, and well, my friend in Arlington, their kid is doing distance learning, and they've, whatever the other districts are doing. Could you just give us quick context?
Yeah.
How does FCPS's distance learning program compare to our regional neighbors, as well as, I think we're the 11th largest district. What are the top 10 doing?
Yeah.
If you could tell us about that.
Glad to take that question. That's a narrative that's been on social media, and with all due respect, I think that's a false narrative that's been shared. Couple of things I'd want to share with you. First, about other districts. LA is not doing any face-to-face learning. We've done our review to look at some of these other districts. Miami is not doing face-to-face. They're doing what we call asynchronous, that we did at the very beginning, which is post pre-recorded videos, post lessons, check in with kids through email and other means, but they're not doing face-to-face learning. Houston's not doing face-to-face learning. Some districts are doing some sort of combination, which is what we're trying to do. Broward's doing a combination. Hillsborough, which is in Tampa, Florida, a large system. New York is working to do a hybrid like we are. They're using Google, but they're also using Microsoft Teams, which is something we're starting to look at as we think about even for next year, a possibility. Arlington is not doing face-to-face learning. Loudoun is doing some face-to-face learning, but is not following a bell schedule that's division-wide shared. There's no minimal requirement in Loudoun. I just spoke with the superintendent this afternoon. So some of what's been put on social media as the narrative doesn't really represent the true reflection. Fairfax wanted to do more. It wanted to do more than other school districts, and that was our promise. And we were able to deliver on the first part of the promise. But the second part, the face-to-face, we were slow, we were late in getting it right. I believe we have it right now, and going forward, we have the lessons learned to make sure that we're not in this situation again, and we we know that this is the way that we're going to continue to get better. And we're going to reach out to districts as we're all experimenting right now with the different platforms, what works better. And I'm doing more of that now with a national consortium I'm a part of and with our region, so that we really come up with, this has been a trial and error process this last month. And we've really got to make sure we come up with the best ideas moving forward in case school is like this for longer than just a fourth quarter. And there's a lot of indication that we may have to look at least the option, even if we go back to school normal in the fall, that we could have a second wave and that we may need to do distance learning again. So I think school in some ways is going to be fundamentally different. We're going to have to rethink access to technology here in Fairfax County Public Schools like we never did before. And one final point just to make about the delay. One thing, just being honest, when you talked about comparing to other school districts, lots of other school districts had devices for kids at elementary, middle, and high. This year was the first year that we had devices for kids at high school for every high school kid. We had it in a few schools, but we didn't have it in every school until just this year. Just a month ago, the board agreed to do FCPS on, not just at high school for next year, but also for middle school. So that's already done. And we're already having discussions with the school board about the need to have a device for every child, kindergarten to 12th grade for next year. And so as I bring the budget, the final budget to the school board next month, look for plans that have something around access for every child, kindergarten through 12th grade.
Okay, thank you. Kara, let's move into questions about what we can expect moving forward. Would you like to take those?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Brabrand, for kind of talking about how we got here. You've alluded a little bit to how we are moving forward. So we'd like to spend about 20 minutes just kind of thinking about the future. There's a lot of uncertainties. Everybody's guessing what's going to happen. Are you able to give us any information about discussions happening for summer learning and then fall learning?
Sure. So we have return to school work groups that Dr. Duran, our Chief Equity Officer, is put together. We're going to bring ideas and proposals to our May 11th school board meeting. So, and we're going to want community input. We're going to want school board input. And I think there's several scenarios to look at. One is, can school start like it used to be? I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that's one. Can we just return as normal in late August? The second that we're taking a deep look at is, how can we do school with distance learning requirements or guidelines in effect? Is there a way to do distance learning successfully in our elementary, middle, and high schools? And that might look at staggered schedules or alternating schedules. Or can we space kids more out and limit movement of them between classes during the day? The CDC just put up some interim guidance today. I think it was in the Washington Post. We just pulled it down to look at how it would look on a bus, how it would look in the cafeteria. Maybe in the cafeteria, we're not actually bringing kids there. We're bringing the meals to their classroom. So there's less movement across the classroom. And then the third option is really looking at school where we have a even more robust distance learning that we have now, more than the minimums that we've shared now, and we do a version of really distance learning or our online campus that we've done for years for our children, until we get more information that the threat of COVID-19 is minimized. So part of it is, those are the options. Part of it is listening to our medical community. Part of it is, how does our community feel? I mean, we're in a national discussion about how to weigh supporting the safety of our kids and teachers and staff with trying to restart our economy. And what does that look like for Fairfax County and for Northern Virginia and for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia and for the DMV area? And we're all in discussions. I'm so glad the governors and Mayor Bowser are working together and talking, and we really, the better that we can have a unified approach instead of who's Dr. Brabrand to decide the best way to do this. I mean, we want to keep safety in mind. Superintendents have had years to do snow days, but we've never had to face really how to handle a medical situation, a pandemic. And so we're bringing plans together. We want to get community, and we will get community support. We're continuing to look, by the way, at our graduation options. Can we do some form of face-to-face graduation before the summer ends? Or do we need to wait till later in the fall, over a break, or into the winter, or even next spring? We want to hear what folks have to say. We know our students want that graduation in some form or fashion, especially with their other classmates. And so we have hard decisions to make, and we want to make them together. We don't want to make them just here at Gatehouse. We need family input, we need community input, and we're planning to do that even with graduations as well, and our return to school plans.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Are you able to speak to anything specifically for the summer? We've had questions about extended school year, the enrichment opportunities, high school credit recovery courses. Are we going to be able to shift any of that?
Yeah, certainly by May 11th, when we come to the board, we need to have our summer options for you. I know we postponed registration for some of our favorite face-to-face activities over the summer, but we're not saying right now at all that we're going to give up on having summer opportunities. We're deep at work on providing, even if it's a virtual opportunity, some kinds of summer opportunities, because we know this already. And this is one of the things that I know is out there. There's always the summer learning slide that we talk about. There's already the COVID slide. We've already had a break in learning for our kids. How do we start to catch them up and actually accelerate them beyond? So we are looking at what we can do to help this summer begin to catch kids up and actually start to get them ahead. And we will have ideas to share with the board and the entire community in just about 2 more weeks.
That sounds awesome. You mentioned collaborating with other local leaders, whether it's other superintendents or the mayor or our governors. What impact does VDOE have on your decision-making process?
Well, we've worked hard to, partner with VDOE, and I want to say, listen, Dr. Lane has an unenviable task to try to be in charge of 132 school districts in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he's met regularly with all of the superintendents, and he's reached out personally to me. He's asked me to be co-chair with 2 other superintendents for looking at accreditation. What recommendation? As you know, accreditation, there are no SOL tests this spring. He's asked me to look at what does that look like for next spring, because there's already concerns about how we are going to hold students and schools accountable next spring. Are we going to do SOLs just like we did before? Or if we do, are we going to count those against kids or against schools? So I'm part of a co-chair task force with 2 other superintendents, one from Charlottesville, Rosa Atkins, and the other from Salem, Virginia. It's outside of Roanoke, Alan Siebert. And the 3 of us are leading an advisory group to give a recommendation in about 2 or 3 more weeks to the state superintendent about accreditation for next year. And if you have ideas that you want to share with me, please send those to Jane and I will share them. But I'll tell you right now, all 3 superintendents will include one of the recommendations to waive accreditation for next spring as well. That's not to say that we may not have SOL testing, but we don't want to penalize our kids or our schools for the impact that COVID-19 has had. We want to be able to get them back in schools and back in full-time learning with supports and begin to catch them up. So we'll look at whether there's some additional alternatives, and that's what we're doing over the next 2 weeks, and I'll keep you updated on that when I have more information.
Thank you. We have just a couple more follow-up questions, specifically geared towards if we are in a virtual learning environment. Could you address rising seniors applying to college and sophomores taking driver's education next year?
Okay, so a couple of things on that. We do know that a lot of colleges now are making SAT and ACT optional. The College Board is also talking about scheduling more of those exams in the fall. on a more like almost weekly basis. Now, all that's still subject to change with the schedule, but if we're in school, the College Board was looking at almost every Saturday being an SAT or ACT Saturday. Again, as I said, a lot of colleges are talking about already making SATs optional for students and not penalizing them if the SAT or ACT is not on their college application. You had another question about behind the wheel. Later this week, for all of our kids currently in behind the wheel, we recognize that the distance learning is not enough hours for you to complete your state requirement. And we're going to be offering a way for you to have an additional class to get the hours necessary for you to get that state requirement here. Now, behind the wheel is still canceled, and we'll have to schedule that just like we would anytime. But the instructional hours necessary, we're going to invest money to provide that extra time that kids need for the driver's ed. And then we'll look at doing something similar like that for the fall if we're still in a distance learning environment.
Awesome. I believe you mentioned that you are presenting an option to the school board where every child is going to have access to technology, K through 12. I just wanted to confirm that that's what you had mentioned.
My intention is to bring something to the board that has access for every child, technology access, part of the board's deliberations. We're getting about $20 million in one-time stimulus money as a result of COVID-19. Technology can be part of it. The board's already voted, as I told you, for FCPS on for the middle school, which we already had for the high school this year. So really elementary is that missing link, and we are talking kindergarten through 6th grade. And so I put $2 million in the budget just last week around technology supports. That could be devices, that could be additional SBIT support in elementary schools. Some of our SBITs are only 0.5 in our elementary schools, some of our smaller ones. So we don't have the final contours yet, but I'm convinced we have to have access for every kid. Even if we open normally during the school year in August with social distancing, we could have a second wave, and we don't want to have time spent doing laptop distribution like we had to do earlier this March. And back to that question, what took time? One of the things we were doing, we spent 2 weeks distributing laptops to elementary and middle school families that didn't have them, over 15,000. Some districts didn't have to do that. They could hit the ground running. Loudon had computers all the way from 3rd grade up. We didn't. And so that did take some more time. We're not going to make that mistake again. As I said, we have some lessons learned, and that's one of them. So you will see a plan to the board in 3 weeks, 2 weeks that has technology access as part of the equation, part of the solution.
Thank you. We keep on mentioning kindergarten through 12, but I do know that some of our schools have special education preschool. How are we factoring those students?
Yes, you'll be glad to know Maura Burke, who is our director of preschool and early education, is leading one of the return to work guidelines. So I said K through 12. I'm going to look at her guidelines. If she thinks even at the pre-K level, that's what we need to do, I'll be absolutely open to it. But I don't want to speak for her yet and her team around pre-K. Our special education kids, and we talked about it last week, and I want to say it to parents right now. I'll say it next week. We understand our obligations for FAPE, and we're going to do our very best to provide it under the constraints of distance learning. It's trying to be honest and transparent that can we do all of what we had done before? We're going to strive to do our best, but we're certainly not going to sit and do nothing. We have a lot that we can do to support these students, but we're not going to say falsely that we can provide the exact same supports in a virtual distance learning environment that we did in a face-to-face. Not for some children with some of the needs. I want to prioritize getting those students back in a face-to-face learning environment as much as possible. And we're going to need to look at these guidelines that we get from our health authorities to help us guide. But we've got to make our kids with special needs a priority as we bring them back and give them the support and services necessary. And we've just tried to be honest. We're all trying to adapt right now. And we've created these temporary learning plans. And it is building trust to go, look, it's trying to offer the best of what we can do. It's certainly not something that we realize is everything that we could want if we had it in a normal classroom, but we're trying to provide our best. And it's not a waiver of rights to do the TLP. It's not an IEP, and we're not saying that it is, or it's as robust as an IEP would be. It's not one size fits all. So we're trying to do something and do our best. And we know there's going to be more to do when these kids return, when all of our kids return. Mm-hmm. And it's just an unimaginable moment for every educator in this country trying to adjust to what we're in. But we are working around the clock with plans to bring forward for this community to give you the very best we can and to offer the best education if we have to continue distance learning that we can.
And PTA presidents, if you missed it earlier, Dr. Brabrand is having a special through SEPTA, a meeting next Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. That's going to be just about special education. So I know we kind of did like the sky high view right here, but they're going to go more in depth next week. And then go ahead.
We also sent out today, Ms. Johnson sent out today more information, a newsletter just for special education parents with more information, more expectations clearly defined for what our teachers are doing. And we hope that's helpful. More information about the TLPs and communication. One of the things, and Jane, you've shared it with me personally, and I appreciate people have been frank with me. I know that communication from my office needs to be simpler and more concise, and during daytime hours as well, quite frankly, and not in the evening. And we also know from listening to parents, you know who they most want to hear from is from their teachers and from their school principal. And when I do communicate moving forward, I am going to work much harder to do it more clearly, more concisely, and during normal working hours and not late in the evening, which I know has caused unnecessary confusion and stress on our families and frankly on our staff. And I apologize to our staff just last week for much of that confusion. It all rests with me. And I pledge to you all that I've heard the community feedback about communications, and you will begin to see differences in how we communicate moving forward. We can do it better, and we will do it better.
Jane, that sounds like a great segue to our next section, which is about consistency in communication.
Right. If I could just follow up a little bit further on that statement, Dr. Brabrand. Parents do want to hear from their teachers, right? That's what matters, is that connection between the child and the teacher. They've really missed each other. This has just been such a heartbreak for everyone involved. But how exactly do you see that happening? I know that plans are underway to streamline things, but we're really drinking from a fire hose of emails. And FCPS, to your credit and to your team's credit, there is so much information on the FCPS website, and there are daily updates. I would advise all presidents to check fcps.edu. I just found out myself last week that there have been daily updates with how we are navigating our new world. So what are some of the ways? I mean, what can we expect and when can we expect to not be so overwhelmed?
Right. You know, as we do the return to learn plan, we're really going to work to provide what that communication is going to look like, not just for next month, for the summer, for the fall. We're going to provide a structure for what communications will look like, because we know right now the current way we're doing it just isn't working as well as it needs to. We have overdone the communication. It's come from too many places. Sometimes it's been confusing. And so we're going to go back to the drawing board and really look at how we can do things more clearly and more concise. That doesn't mean you're never going to hear from the superintendent, but you need to hear less and provide the overall direction. What are we doing next week? What are we doing for the rest of the school year? this year, this fourth quarter, and what are we doing for next year? You need to get that overall framework from me, and then we need to let school principals and teachers fill in that detail. What's happened a little bit, really honestly, is we've had a lot of the detail coming out of central office. And that is just not the way people have usually been able or have usually communicated in Fairfax. And so people have had to go hunting around for different information. And so I know we changed our communication to more central communication over the last month, and centralizing it didn't make it better. And so we're really going to go back to making schools and our teachers and principals the primary communication vehicle, with more targeted, more strategic, more simple and concise communication from me. So that's the plan. The specifics of exactly how that will look, I'm going to have for you in the next couple of weeks. But it's not going to be months. We know communication needs to be better now. And part of why I'm here tonight is we need to admit it needs to be better. And part of it is coming here tonight and being honest about it and sharing that we're going to have a plan moving forward where I broadly set out the goals and the vision, and we let our schools and our school leaders, our principals and teachers fill in those details.
Thank you. Okay. And speaking of the principals, we all felt the shift when principals and the teachers were empowered over the past 2 weeks to start making some decisions about how they were going to connect with their kids. Moving forward, the good part to principal empowerment is that the principals know their communities best. The downside is principals making different decisions. So for example, we heard from one mom who has 2 middle school children at 2 different middle schools and had night and day experiences with what those schools were doing. So where do you strike the balance between local empowerment and equity and fairness to all of our families and students?
So the most candid answer is the issue around this issue of implementation in schools has been with Fairfax County Public Schools for some time. And it's true in a lot of districts that are large. How does it look exactly the same? I do want to say each community is a little different in Fairfax. We need to be honest that every community is not exactly the same, but we do need to be sure we have clear expectations for what we expect. That is something that we can do a little bit better or a lot bit better. And first, I would tell parents, first work with your teacher, then work with your principal. And if you're still believing that even after you've talked to your principal, the issue can't be resolved, reach out to our region assistant superintendents. We have 5 region assistant superintendents. It was a role I held actually over a decade ago. And it's part of resolving problems before they become system-wide issues. And sometimes it's an issue of confusion or misunderstandings. Sometimes it is something that wasn't done right and needs to be corrected. But really, before you go to social media, I'd encourage you to reach out to our teacher, our principal, and then if necessary, reach out to the region assistant superintendents. The region office information is on our website. It's at the bottom of every one of our school profiles. And let those folks, they're a wonderful group, help solve the problems you're experiencing. We don't want to see disparate experiences across schools. And when that's happening, bring it to us, give us a chance to correct it. And the issues that are being brought forward to me personally, I am forwarding on to them. We have a deputy superintendent, Dr. Ivy, who all these region assistant superintendents report to, and I've asked her to absolutely make sure we're resolving the parent issues as they come up.
Okay, thanks. And just as we're closing out, I want to get back to how parents should expect to be involved in kind of building this plane that we're flying into, the summer and the fall and next year with the fluid information we all still have to work with. This morning, Kara and I met with Dr. Duran to start talking about how the PTAs might play a role in getting some parent feedback. Just right now we're trying to take the pulse of what are parents' thoughts about different scenarios coming back to school, even though they haven't been defined yet? What's on their mind? Are they worried? Do they have ideas? Do they have questions? So we sent a quick questionnaire to our presidents today, and we will get a summary of what we've been able to gather to Dr. Duran by Friday. But what are, in addition to parents reaching out to school board members or their principals or, even your leadership team, what are some ways we should expect that parents can and should weigh in as we progress through the next few months?
Well, I'm glad we're working with you all to get PTA president and other members of the PTA feedback now to inform the return to work plans. I encourage you to share information with me, with your school principal. A lot of school principals are still holding the coffee times.
Yep.
And frankly, I spend a lot of time working with our principal organizations. We have an association president for our high schools, for our middle and elementary. They've been a part of almost every call. I reach out. I was speaking with the teacher association leaders. We have the AFT, we have FEA, we have APFA. I talk to them. But for parents, working through your PTA is one. Working through your school principal is another strong way I encourage you. And if you have something that's really weighing on you and you don't feel comfortable with that, I encourage parents to use our ombudsman office. I set this up 2 years ago to be a place where you can go confidentially, but have someone that's neutral and share a concern. And please consider reaching out through those. We know also a lot of our parents have sometimes language barriers. Reach out to our parent liaisons in our schools and share with them in your language where you're most comfortable about what some concerns are. And we know some issues around equity have been raised. One about equity of access for technology, but also about how we've looked at each other through COVID-19, about where it came from or who has it or who doesn't. And we need to be clear that we're all in this together and COVID-19 affects everyone. So I encourage parents to use the PTA, the principals, the ombudsman's office, and to know that as best I can, I try to answer emails that come directly to me. So if there's something heavy on your heart, you'll get a reply from me or someone will follow up on my behalf. We need to work together with families. We haven't done it perfectly. So I'm not here tonight to make excuses about the past, but I am here to say let's partner for the future. Let's do it well. We're all invested in wanting FCPS to be the best. It is a premier district. It didn't do this rollout as well as it should have or could have, and I'm responsible for that. But I'm also responsible as a leader to move forward, and I'm ready to move forward with this group to make sure that what we're going to do for the summer and for the fall has parent support. And I would say one last thing on this. I think one of the things I want to hear is whether I shared we go back normal, we go back with distance learning, or we go back virtual. Perhaps we go back and there is still the option for some folks who want to have that experience in a virtual fashion while others return to school. And what do parents feel about having that permission to come in when they feel ready, not when we say we're ready to come back? So that's one of the things I'm just thinking about out loud, that we know different families have different criteria for when they feel comfortable. We know the fall, from everything we hear, we won't have a vaccine yet. Our best protection is still going to be social distancing. So if we're back in school, but folks are not comfortable with social distancing, how can we still deliver education to your child? I want to hear those things. And I look forward to getting your feedback just this week, and we'll have more opportunities. I hope this is not the last time you invite me to do something like this.
No, we're happy to have you again.
Well, I'd like to come back as often, and this maybe the feedback will be this is a whole lot better than a late night letter, to have this kind of interaction and maybe even additional interaction, so that folks can make sure their voices are being heard. But I understand all the frustration that has built up these last few weeks. I'm a parent in this system too.
Mhm.
I have a frustrated family too, and I know and I will do better, and we'll do better together on behalf of Fairfax County Public Schools.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand.
Thank you, Kara.
We
Thank you, Jane. Thank you all PTA presidents. I really appreciate your time tonight. It's an hour of your time, and I hope we have an opportunity to do more of this in the future.
Terrific. Presidents, we will create a link to a recording of this meeting, and we'll share it so you can share it out with your communities just as soon as we can get it to you. Please urge your parents to stay in contact with their teachers and principals and to check FCPS.edu each day for daily updates. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy and safe. Thank you, Dr. Brabrand, to you and your team for being here. And we'll all be in touch. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.